Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Transit Windsor drivers and other employees may go on strike next week, with sources telling CBC it may even be as early as Monday. Plus, today the federal government gave an agriculture business millions of dollars for updates to their plant. And an update tonight on the Riverfront's Legacy Beacon, which will be home to a historic streetcar that operated almost a century ago. We begin tonight's show with an exclusive story. The city has been put on strike notice by the union representing Transit Windsor employees. As the CBC's Chris Ensing explains, transit users may need to find another way around Windsor as early as next week.
About 250 Transit Windsor employees, ranging from drivers to administrative staff, could be on strike next week. Sources telling CBC News the union is warning the city it could happen as early as Monday. Both sides have been negotiating a new collective agreement after it expired in the fall, and this comes at a very interesting time. Council is going over a proposed budget for this year that includes increases to the Transit Windsor budget for new sick programs that were brought by the federal government. That includes $500,000 in annual funding to keep the program going and $1 million in one-time costs to get it up and running. Those budget documents also point to unprecedented ridership pressures. They've seen a 20 to 30% growth in ridership compared to what it was before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, numbers plummeted, and the service says revenue still has not caught up. We did ask for an interview with Transit Windsor today. They did not reply to our request. Now, we did speak with Nate Hope. He's somebody who uses the transit service every single day. He's also somebody who advocates for people to use the bus and for more funding. Here's what he said a strike would do to him.
For me personally, and I'm sure other students, for example, if there was a strike, that would be really difficult for us to get to our classes, especially right now. The university, it's on a couple different ends of the city, you know, like it's in by the university, by the bridge, and then also downtown. There's some spots that we have to travel back and forth between. So that would make it super difficult. My schedule is already pretty tight.
We've asked the union for details about what this strike could look like. They are not commenting. And just because a strike notice has been issued doesn't mean that it will happen. This last occurred in 2020, the union giving notice, but a deal was reached an hour before the deadline. Sources say this deadline is set for Monday at 12:01 a.m. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Windsor.
The federal government has invested more than $26 million into the local ADM Agri-Industries plant. The company applied for the money through a National Trade Corridor Fund. They're located along the river in the West End at the Port of Windsor and produce vegetable oils and livestock feed from canola and soybean seed.
And we're announcing today the single largest federal investment ever in the history of Port Windsor.
The plant that employs 150 people also exports corn and wheat grown in the area. The investment means the company will be able to purchase more grain from southwestern Ontario producers. Shipments that go through the plant account for 20% of the annual volumes for the Port of Windsor, with the general manager saying the money will go towards a $76 million expansion that should be complete by the end of next year.
First, we're going to improve our truck loading capacity by introducing a new roadway and kiosk system. We're going to add new grain dryers that are going to be efficient to allow us to receive grain from the farmer and dry it and condition it, and allow us to buy more grain from the producers. We're going to increase our storage capacity. That's going to allow us to, again, buy more grain from local producers in southwestern Ontario, export it around the world, and support global food security.
The federal government is facing new questions on housing affordability today. It stems from a story first reported in the Canadian press that Ottawa was warned 2 years ago that high immigration would impact the cost of housing. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada told the deputy minister and others that construction had not kept up with the pace of population growth. public servants warn the government that an increase in residents would put pressure on health care and affordable housing. Today, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland was asked about it.
Canada is probably the country in the world which is the most welcoming of new Canadians, which is the most welcoming of immigrants. And as finance minister, I have to say that is a huge economic strength. It is a real driver of our country's economic growth.
The feds decided to increase the number of permanent residents Canada welcomes each year to 500,000 in 2025. That means next year, this country will welcome nearly twice as many permanent residents compared to 2015. Immigration accounts for nearly all population growth in Canada, given the country's aging demographics. Meanwhile, today, Windsor-Tecumseh MP Eric Kuzmierczuk defended the government's immigration policy. He says there's a labor shortage with 1 million skilled trade positions vacant in Canada right now. For those reasons, he says immigration is needed. Kuzmierczuk is calling on municipalities and provinces to help with the housing shortage.
We need all levels of government working together, local, provincial, federal, as well as universities and colleges, to make sure that we're building the housing required to house the folks that are coming into our community. So we can do both, and we should do both at the same time, and that's what we're focused on.
Windsor police are looking for a man who has been missing for weeks. 64-year-old Scott Kersey was last seen on Christmas Day, according to police, but was announced missing on January 9th. He's described as a black male, 5'3" and about 120 pounds, and was last seen wearing a distinctive white suit with black lapels and boots. Police say they closed Black Oak Heritage Park in East Windsor Monday as part of the investigation. They're asking anyone who may have information about his whereabouts to contact the police immediately. Almost 7 years since the project was first approved, the Legacy Beacon is taking shape on Windsor's Riverfront. By this fall, it should be ready to showcase a historic electric trolley that was active almost a century ago. Streetcar number 351 is believed to have been built in Ohio in 1918 and purchased for Windsor in 1926. The city says it hopes all of the site's features will be ready for the grand opening.
The structure that's coming up now, higher than the rest of the building, so we'll say the western portion of the building, that is the portion that will house the streetcar. So it's a gallery space. It's a little bit obviously taller than the eastern portion of the building, which is the concession area, the washrooms and everything else. That's sort of, single story structure. And then the gallery space is like a story and a half to allow for the streetcar to be in there and allow for proper space and everything around it to really, showcase the streetcar.
A CBC News investigation has found Amazon Canada has sold weapons that are illegal in Canada. And it appears some of them, including stun guns and switchblades, have made it into the country. Angelina King has more on what we were able to find online and what happened when Amazon was alerted.
It was a bestseller on Amazon, more than 300 sold in the last month. It's advertised as a camping knife, but it's actually a switchblade.
It doesn't matter that you call it a camping knife. If it's a knife where you press a button and a blade springs out of the handle, that's a prohibited weapon and you're not allowed to have it.
And the buyer in Canada knew that, alongside the video writing this 5-star review. It works, and it made it through customs. Somehow this very illegal knife made it to my house, and I could not be happier. Another buyer writing, crazy how Amazon sells illegal, depending on where you live, weapons with overnight delivery. The knife was taken down after CBC Toronto contacted Amazon. The company says the seller is now banned. A customer and former Amazon employee flagged to CBC that illegal weapons were being sold on the site. We also found these brass knuckles and several stun guns, often advertised as flashlights. Those too have since been removed.
I was absolutely shocked.
This former Amazon employee says they noticed stun guns on the site while working for the company in October. They alerted management. We aren't identifying them for fear of repercussions to their future employment.
I was kind of a little embarrassed that my company that I worked for would have such lousy safeguards to allow something like this to be listed.
They took this screenshot of the stun gun while Amazon took it down after it was reported. The workers said it was back online days later.
This shouldn't be like playing whack-a-mole, you know.
Well, this one does say stun gun in the photos. What could happen if you're caught with it?
You could be charged with a criminal offense of possession of a prohibited weapon. But more than that, the person who is selling or importing this could also face criminal consequences, either for trafficking a prohibited weapon or for importing a prohibited weapon.
Technically, Amazon doesn't import goods, but we still ask the company if it has any legal concerns, given that it facilitates these sales and that it could have prohibited weapons in its Canadian warehouses. The company told me, alongside with banning the seller, if illegal items like that knife are discovered, they contact law enforcement to destroy them.
That's the CBC's Angelina King reporting. Here in Windsor, we've experienced some of the longest ER wait times in Ontario, but it's a similar situation across the province, which has some doctors and politicians urging the Ford government to do more to address the issue. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has more.
At one point this afternoon, the average wait time at Sunnybrook Hospital's ER was more than 8 hours. The longest a patient waited at Montfort Hospital in Ottawa today was 14 hours. And Markham Stouffville Hospital is warning of longer waits than usual, adding an alert in red at the top of its website. The Canadian Medical Association says it's a problem across the country.
I've honestly never seen the wait times in emergencies be this bad across the board.
There's a surge in respiratory viruses, especially the flu. Plus, 1 in 5 Canadians don't have a family doctor or primary care provider. She wants governments to open up more spaces at medical schools. An emergency physician at St. Michael's Hospital downtown says homelessness adds to the issue there.
So someone who has a fever and a skin infection might be able to care for themselves even in a shelter, but cannot care for themselves in the winter on a sidewalk. And so that means that person needs to be admitted. You need to find a place to place them.
Opposition parties urge the province to do more.
It is not unique to Ontario. It is not even unique to Canada. What is unique is the vacuum of leadership in Ontario, the lack of action.
A bed is just a bed, and it's going to sit empty unless we have the healthcare workers there to staff it.
The government says it's invested millions more this year to reduce wait times and says they're longer in many other parts of the country. Markham Stouffville says its ER visits are up 200% this year versus last. It's encouraging people with less urgent issues to go elsewhere, like the community health center.
You need to come, you come. Please don't. The doors are always open. We don't want anybody to not go to the emergency if they need to go to the emergency.
And hospitals remind people that in all emergency departments, the most urgent cases are seen first. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
A beautiful frosty look at West Windsor right now for the first time in what seems like all winter. We woke up to a little bit of snow, and there's more of it on the way. Your weather forecast coming up after the break. Winter started warm this year with little snow, but that's starting to change, which means driving is changing too, and that change can take some getting used to, whether it's your first Canadian winter or the latest of many. Calgary driving instructor Hassan Al-Samrai has prepared a checklist.
Winter is a fact of life in Canada, but most of the people actually, even the people who are living in Calgary for long years, they cannot adjust the way of driving in the first day of snowing, and they end up with problems. And on the other hand, we have people coming from out of Canada who never seen the snow in their life, and they have no clue of how to manage this situation. They need to adapt the way how they are driving from the normal driving to the winter driving. First of all, when you start driving, you should apply the gas little by little, because you expect that it was going to start skidding and spinning. So you should be very careful, you should be very slow. And the second thing, when you see that the car ahead of you start moving, you should not follow right away. You should leave more space and more time between your vehicle and the vehicle ahead of you. If you are driving and you are turning right or left, you start slowing down before you make the turn. Don't break through the turn. When you are slow enough to make your turn, start turning and don't push the gas until you finish your turn, then apply the gas again gently. Actually, winter tires is very helpful. It has more depth. And more importantly, I think the rubber itself is different. It has been made in a way it will hold and make the traction between the tire and the road itself. In winter time, we do recommend to have extra cloth, extra blanket, have all the time a jug of windshield wipers, have all the time a shovel so that you can prepare yourself just in case it happened, you went off the ditch or for some situation there is no help beside you, there is no connection for your cell phone, at least you can keep yourself warm till help will approach you. If you have snow in the back and the rear window, how are we going to melt it? There is a specific spot for that. You just hit it. It's a heater for the rear window. It's going to clear your rear window and keep it available for you to see what you have behind you. The first day of snowing, every single year, we found 200 to 300 accidents. Why? Right? People don't think that it is cold. They're going to turn the engine on, heat in the cabin. When they get inside the car, they find it is warm, it's nice. Yes, it is warm, but the tires are still cold. And the roads are still cold. They don't have that enough traction. You need to be very, very slow until you create that heat with your tires, until you create that friction or the traction between the tires and the asphalt.
Josiah, I know you are very familiar with winter driving conditions in Calgary.
Yeah, Meg, that's my hometown. And watching that video gave me a little bit of PTSD. I've definitely had some winters where I'm skidding, making a left turn. And honestly, it's the same. That first snowfall in Calgary, there's accidents all the time. You have to give yourself that extra hour. And it makes today in Windsor seem like a bit of small potatoes, if I'm honest.
Sure.
No, I do hear that winter tires in this city are a bit of a touchy subject. What's your take on that? And what's on your car?
Well, I guess, yes, it depends who you ask. I am an all-seasons person, and I don't want anyone to come for me, but I don't live very far from work. I don't drive very much, especially during the winter, so it works for my lifestyle. But when I was living in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, I was so scared of the hills there and all the snow that I got studded tires.
Oh, next level.
Yes, yeah. They are, and they seem to work really well, but they were really, really loud, so I don't mind the driving. Back here, do you still put winter tires on your cars now that you're living in Windsor?
You know what, it's kind of like what I said. This is like very easy for me.
Yeah.
It's a big, easy adjustment. So no, I'm also all seasons. And after a lifetime of driving in Calgary winters, I think I've picked up on those tips, like give a lot of space and, pump your brakes before the stoplight and just kind of be a little more cautious. Do you have any driving tips for Windsorites that you've picked up?
I'm the last person probably you should ask, but my mom is a really good driver. She is very cautious. She's awesome in the snow. Lots of hockey tournaments, of course, driving up the 401. And she would tell me to leave a lot of space. I can picture her saying that to me. So I'm going to go with leaving lots and lots of space. Yeah, it sounds like we might have to implement some of these driving tips this coming weekend. What do you have in store for us?
I hope everyone's been taking notes because that just might be the case, Meg. Unfortunately, real winter is lurking around the corner, and today is just a little taste of some of the cold temperatures coming our way. That's following the pattern we're seeing throughout most of the country, with that Arctic front expected to come down, really hitting Western Canada. I looked up Calgary today, speaking of which, and their high tomorrow is -30. That's without the wind chill, so add on like an extra -15 degrees. So just to give you a bit of perspective before we dive in here, we're lucky. Let's talk about right now, we're sitting at 2 degrees with the chance of flurries continuing until 10 p.m. And looking ahead, let's take a look at that 5-day. Tomorrow, a mix of rain and snow throughout the day with a high of 3. Saturday, a high of -1 with snow throughout the day. Sunday is now forecasting a bit higher than what was initially forecasted. Still chilly, a high of -8 with a 40% chance of flurries, and that dips down to -14 as a low that evening. Monday, a high of -10 and cloudy. That continuing into a chillier Tuesday with a high of -12. But Meg, so far, no precipitation on the Monday or Tuesday anticipated, and that could be the last day of that mini cold snap. So we'll have an updated forecast for you tomorrow.
That is chilly. That's chilly.
Yeah, not as chilly as Calgary.
No, we are lucky to be where we are. Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Josiah. We've got Elvis fans are all shook up in Australia. We tell you why coming up. Closing arguments were delivered today in Donald Trump's civil fraud trial. He's accused of overvaluing his assets. Trump calls it persecution, repeating that word today more than once. The CBC's Chris Reyes reports.
On the last day of Donald Trump's New York civil fraud trial, at every opportunity, he made sure he got the final word. Trump talked to cameras as he went in and out of the courtroom.
It is indeed a terrible witch hunt. So this is an out-of-control attorney general.
Trump then held a separate news conference at one of his properties, cited in this case for being overvalued, 40 Wall Street. He did this after his lawyers delivered their closing arguments.
And it's been a very successful building, but it's a shame to have gone through this for years and years and years, and now we'll see if we're going to get an honest verdict.
Trump and New York Attorney General Letitia James had front row seats in court as their teams delivered fiery closing arguments. But even there, it was Trump who took the spotlight when Judge Arthur Engoron allowed him a few minutes to speak. In the testy exchange, Trump ranted about being the victim, that his company's financial statements are perfect. And then he accused the judge of having an agenda, and that's when the judge told him to wrap it up. Outside the courtroom, Trump's lawyers once again railed against the case.
But for anybody that was in the courtroom for the last 11 weeks, you heard that there was not one fact against President Trump. There was not one piece of paper that showed anyone committed fraud.
In their closing arguments, state attorneys said that Trump and his associates can't run from the fact that many of their properties have already been ruled to be overvalued. On a post on X today, Attorney General Letitia James wrote, "No matter how rich or powerful you pretend to be, no one is above the law." After today's final statements, this case will be decided entirely by Judge Engoron, who has already ruled that Trump and his associates are liable for fraud on some of the charges. This ruling will decide the scope of the penalties. Attorney General Letitia James is suing for $370 million. She's also asking the judge to ban Trump from practicing any real estate business in New York for life. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
CBC's Canada Reads book contest has announced its final 5. A celebrity reads each book, then explains why that book should win. One of those reviewers, former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi, who says it was a chance to get back into reading.
I used to read so much. Like, that was a big part of my life. And like so many of us, I've let work and screens kind of take over my life.
Nenshi reviewed Denison Avenue by Christina Wong and Daniel Innes. The other contenders are Bad Cree by Jessica Johns, Carly Fortune's Meet Me at the Lake, Taya Mutonji's Shut Up You're Pretty, and The Future by Catherine LaRue. The debate on who wins starts March 4th. Elvis fans are all shook up in Australia. Hundreds are making the annual pilgrimage to the Aussie outback to attend a massive tribute festival for the iconic singer. The king himself would have been proud to see scores of hip-shaking, wig-wearing Elvis fans. Revelers hopped on the Elvis Express from Sydney to make the 6-hour journey to the event. Along the way, they're treated to a steady stream of Elvis-themed entertainment, featuring impersonators in iconic gem-encrusted jumpsuits who belt out some of Presley's biggest hits. This year's theme is the 1957 musical drama Jailhouse Rock. About 25,000 people attended the yearly celebration. It runs from today through January 15th. That's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.